One. Kevin Hofmann, how's it going?
Good, man. Thanks for having me on.
No problem. Really excited to have you on. You have a very interesting background. That's all I say to every guest. I think if I went through every single episode, it's pretty much my opening line. So if you watch my other podcast, you don't feel so special after hearing that. Don't worry about it. Kevin, you've had a very interesting upbringing, a very amazing introduction to being human in this world, which I'd love to jump into. Introduce yourself. Who's Kevin Hofmann?
Yeah, so I am this biracial kid that was born 53 years ago in Detroit, 2 weeks after what most people call the race riots of '67 in Detroit. So the Detroit was literally still smoking when I breathed my first breath. And to be this biracial kid, to be kind of born into that environment was just a very interesting way to grow up. And then on top of that, you know, I was adopted by a white family because my white mother's white husband didn't want to raise another black man's child. My biological mother, had an affair with a black coworker. And so her husband's response to that was, well, we have to give the child up.
Wow.
Yeah, so that I was born into that and then lived with a white family from age 3 months to now.
In very interesting times. So hold up, hang on. I'm just going to run some numbers real quick.
Mm-hmm.
So that means you're 53 years old.
Yeah.
Dude, you look like a fucking teenager. What's that all about? You look younger than me. I'm 30.
In the States, we say black don't crack.
Oh, wow. If you said that in the UK, there'd be more rioting. Naturally, your introduction to this world has led to some very insightful experiences from you. And now you regularly speak on such sort of racial topics. And I was very keen on getting you on to discuss what's happening at the moment with the current racial landscape. And I've been itching to have this conversation with somebody who's actually qualified, not like a bunch of Karens on Facebook, who are now saving the world from oppression, but somebody with actual actionable insights into these issues. Because something that I'm finding kind of concerning at the moment is how American behavior and societal change is really starting to filter over across the pond. And the political landscape over there really is beginning to influence the minds and the behavior of people over here. And so I think now is a more important time as any for people to really start paying attention on what's going on with these issues, to see how pragmatically the racial tensions can actually be solved, because this is something that we just keep going round and round in circles with, because there's lots of finger pointing, and a lot of white people done a lot of bad shit many years ago, right? Really bad stuff. And at some point proactive change needs to be made. That's not driven by emotion, that's not driven by political agenda, and that's not driven by the need to punish and reprieve. How does that happen? How do we go and move into a society where identity no longer matters and just being human is enough?
Well, I see, but that's the interesting thing. Like, so long in the States for so long, people of color have been told, you are more than welcome here as long as you do it our way. And that's what I used to go to a church, and that was the pastor's kind of thought, which was predominantly white church, some people of color in it. And in his head, I think he thought, I want to celebrate all cultures. But then when it came down to it, he couldn't wrap his head around doing things different than he's only ever seen it. So in his head, his experience was the end all be all. And that's really not what diversity is. So I teach a lot about diversity and inclusion. And what that means is it also means diversity of thought, diversity of, how we do things. And so, real diversity doesn't mean we allow you to be here as long as you do it our way or assimilate to what we do. It means we've got to respect everybody's experiences. And that's the biggest issue that I have with race and racism is I'm going to share with you my experience growing up in the United States. And often the response we people of color get is, well, no, you got that wrong. It didn't happen that way. You're stupid. You misinterpreted it. And everyone thinks, a lot of people here think that police brutality and all these things that we're going through now is just blowing up like crazy and it's coming out of nowhere. But man, we've talked about this since I was born, for at least 50 years that this has been happening. We're just now seeing it because everyone carries a recorder to tape.
Exactly. And of course, mainstream sources of information put it out there when they have a reason to. So let's go back to when you were born and your initial experience, because if we're going to be listening to you as a racial commentator, we need to understand your experience. And so you were born into a family who put you up for adoption, and if I remember rightly, your biological mother tried going down the abortion route, but you survived that. How was that a thing? How does that come about?
Yeah, so my mother, it was the winter of 1967. Her mother had just died. She was heartbroken over this. Her mother was only 52, so it was just out of nowhere. Her mother dies. She's brokenhearted. She knew that she could not be comforted by her husband because he just wasn't made up that way. And so she found comfort in a black coworker. They had an affair. I was born. But when my mother became pregnant, of course, she panicked. And you have to understand, context is so important, especially when we talk about race. So you're talking about 53 years ago, late 60s, in the Detroit area, and it just wasn't accepted for, white women to be sleeping with black guys, quite honestly. That was such a shameful thing. And so she goes to her sister's home to borrow money for an abortion, and her sister actually gave her the money. And my mother left that mobile home where her sister lived, planning to travel an hour away to go and have me aborted. And somewhere along that road, she not only chose to give me life, but she also chose to have to go home to her white husband and admit to him that she had an affair, and then somehow come up with some kind of birthing plan. And her husband was just like, yeah, we're going to give it up. But still, there was a plan made in a not too usual situation. So I'm very thankful that, she made that decision. And yeah, I survived that abortion. Was adopted at 3 months by a white minister, his family. They had at that time 3 biological children. So I'm the youngest in that family. And then a year after I get brought home to their house, they live in a white neighborhood, but a suburb of Detroit, Dearborn, Michigan. And someone burns a cross in our front yard because they didn't want me in that neighborhood.
Wow. How old were you
So
when that
that's
happened?
the context I come out of. And
Yeah, of course. So how old were you when that incident happened?
I was less than a year old.
Wow. And I guess at some point you became conscious of that as an event in your life just through stories, because obviously that's very young. Very hard
So
pushed
I wasn't aware of that story. Actually, I wrote the book on Black and White 10 years ago. And it was probably 2-3 years before that. I was interviewing my adoptive parents and they shared that story with me, which I never knew.
Wow.
I didn't grow up knowing that. And there were so many of those little stories where they were denied access to the white community because they had adopted this black child. My father was blacklisted or couldn't find a job in the church in Michigan for probably 8 to 10 years because he had adopted this child of color. So I grew up in this white household in a black city. We moved to Detroit when I was 3. I lived in a black neighborhood, went to black schools. And so, I've had this interesting racial history growing up.
And of course, on the flip side of your experience, of course, your adopted parents really had a world shattering change through adopting you, which is kind of crazy in itself. Because there's one thing a super racist community treating people differently, that's one thing. But when it's what they would just define as your own, you know, and kind of exiling them because they're just being super chill with a black kid, which is just what it is. They're out, they're gone, and that really shows it's not just a racial issue. It's a human issue, because that's such tribal behavior. If you have a look at, you know, how people witchcraft used to be burnt on stakes, you know, the slightest hint of non-conformity, you're done, you're out. And in this case, that's exactly what's happened. They adopted a black kid in the 60s, and then that was it. They were cancelled. I mean, you know, cancel culture is not new.
Exactly.
What a thing to laugh about. So welcome to the podcast. So very difficult challenging start for you, and of course for your adopted parents. At what point did you start becoming aware consciously that, I'm clearly different and I'm being treated differently?
So I always knew, like, that was the good thing, was that, you know, studies will show you kids can recognize racial differences as early as 6 months old, which is mind blowing. And so I always knew my skin didn't match my parents. And so I always knew I was adopted. Always knew I was different, but probably not until 5 or 6 did I realize or start to notice that I was being treated differently. And unfortunately, we didn't talk about race or adoption when I was growing up. So I kind of had to fill in those blanks. And unfortunately, the answers I gave myself when I would say, well, why are they treating me differently? And the sad answer that I would give myself was, well, there's something broken in you, and that's why they treat you differently. Because I didn't know enough about racism to know that it's just so shallow that people can just kind of, like you said, ostracize you just because they see your skin color is different than theirs.
So fast forward 13 years, because I don't believe you're 50, right? Fast forward 50 odd years, and, you know, we have a look at the current landscape today, and, you know, there are serious racial tensions going on. I mean, they've always existed. They're just being documented more, as you rightfully pointed out. And of course, we have this relatively new thing called Black Lives Matter, which is sweeping the mainstream media, sweeping social media as kind of, you know, the self-appointed spokespeople for the Black community. And it's causing an awful lot of division, and it's causing an awful lot of drama within families and within friends. You know, I'm more than happy to say I believe, of course, Black Lives Matter, but I don't believe the organization Black Lives Matter is the answer to solving that. And at the moment, there's this kind of unwritten rule that you can't have that opinion. You're not allowed to question this organization. You're not allowed to say, actually, are they really doing good stuff for Black people? Or is it a political funding tool? And I'm really interested in discussing with you how you would go about helping with these tensions. If you were in charge, if you were the man to sign legislation or pass bills, or whatever the American terminology is, how would you be doing it?
The answer for the Black community is simple: stop killing us. Like, it's not that hard. So, and I think what that means is systemic change, and especially when you start talking about police brutality. And so, and that's the one thing a lot of people don't understand. A couple of things about Black Lives Matter. One is there's so many fractions claiming that they're part of Black Lives Matter that they aren't. So there's a lot of kind of, you're not getting a clear picture of what they do. And then a lot of people assume Black Lives Matter, like you said, speaks for the Black community, or understands that their mission is to handle all issues Black. And it's not. They are very specifically going after bringing awareness to police brutality against the Black community. So then it frustrates me when people get so frustrated and we hear this a lot in the States, which is, well, yeah, of course there's police brutality, but what about the black people that are killing each other in Chicago?
Mm.
And one, how come Black Lives Matter isn't doing anything about that? One, it's not their mission. There are groups that are designed to handle the issues in the black community. We can do more than one thing. We can handle the issues in the black community when it comes to what's going on in Chicago and all the killings there. And we can also handle police brutality. We're able to do both. And yeah, Black Lives Matter has never said we're going to handle all the problems of the black community.
Mm.
I was on another podcast too long ago. It was actually a really tense podcast because I had another guy on there who was all about Blue Lives Matter, all about the police.
Right.
And yeah, he was just trying to say that Black Lives Matter is horrible. And my example to him was, that's like going into a grocery store or going into a home improvement store and looking for milk and getting mad at the store because they don't have milk. That's not what they do. That's not their mission.
Yeah, I guess the issue is in the name, right? And especially how shallow people are now in the world of clickbait headlines and 10-second Vine videos. People are judging everything in a split second because they don't have time to look into stuff. No one actually reads articles. No one actually watches. No one watches these fucking podcasts in full, mate. No. only 10% of people can get to this point in this episode, right?
Yeah.
And the issue with that is, with the Black Lives Matter stuff, is people are really struggling to look past the name of the organization. And so, of course, if it's Black Lives Matter, their mission is Black Lives Mattering. And that's where the challenge is. And the times I've came out and spoke out against Black Lives Matter have been when having a look at where all the money's been going, which is a shame, because it should all be going to black communities, and there should be a plan and stuff like that. And I really hope that it transitions that way, because it has this huge brand name, right? And it still has a big chance to continue to generate revenue that can actually be used for good. But at the moment, the stuff's come out through Act Blue that it's been used to fund many political campaigns, and a bunch of other stuff, of white ass Caucasian politicians. And I kind of feel like the Black Lives Movement is being hijacked for political gain, almost like the black community's oppression and difficulties are now being used for some sort of political clout over there in the US. From what I can see, I've had many conversations. I'm really putting in the work. And so what I'm looking at, and the conversation I've been having with people, is where the money has been going. Okay. And there's a lot of people coming out, a lot of people in the black community as well, but not enough, asking the question, why are huge chunks of these money going through like Bernie's campaign, vote for Biden's campaign and stuff like that, and not going into black communities in the US?
Well, because I think the thought is, so if you're familiar with the George Floyd, that's the guy that was killed.
Yeah.
The cop sat there with his knee on George's neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. Mm-hmm. And part of, being part of the black community, I think we're just asking, one, not to be killed, and two, just to get off our neck. And so I think some may believe the quickest way to change is politically. And so of course you're going to throw your money at Biden, because he's going to be the one to cause Trump to get his knee off our neck. So that's the quickest relief ASAP that needs to be done. So I can see why that's happening. But you also see, people will concentrate on that, but it's done. Unfortunately, that's the way politics works in the United States, and it's horrible. The National Rifle Association, they do the same thing for the other side. And no one says, well, what about them? And so
I don't know. I mean, the NRA have
to get, like I said, to get his knee off of our neck,
sure,
as soon as possible, and that means in this election. So I see why all the energy is being just forwarded into this election.
And money.
Can't afford another 4 years with this guy in charge.
Sure. Okay. Do you not believe, though, if what they've raised, $1 billion in a relatively short period of time, Black Lives Matter, the organization, and do you not think that money would have been better spent if people like yourself and other spokespeople for Black communities and well, Black lives essentially, create these different pockets of influences in each of these states? Because I'm assuming the way in which Black people in different communities are underfunded, and they lack certain opportunities is very measurable. I mean, you could probably just pick out some states and some areas off the top of your head probably who are really fucking struggling, right? So why can't this organization have these champions, and or you know, or people call yourselves leaders or whatever, however they are, and they become treasurers for this budget that they're given, okay? And they also have somebody else in their team who are like, I don't know, a social helper or something, where they start creating programs, okay? And they can go to the Black Lives organization, go, this is what we want to do for our community. And they get a specific amount of funding from that £1 billion, okay? And then you have all of these individual Black communities starting to get funding and actually putting in the pragmatic support and help to bring up these Black communities, to provide them with the opportunity and the support that gets them off the streets, out of the gangs, and actually involved in a community where there's more love and compassion and understanding, where they can build a purpose in this world. Or instead of that, would you still support just giving all that $1 billion to white politicians so they can regain power?
I think you do both. And I don't know enough about the Black Lives Matter movement to know where their money is going or what they're doing. I would be shocked if they're not doing both. But again, there are a lot of groups that are coming out and saying, we're under the shield of Black Lives Matter. They may not be. I think the majority of them are, because that, like you said, that gets so much attention. So of course, if I'm trying to get attention and move something politically, I'm going to align with them, even if I have seen an interview with the leaders of Black Lives Matter recently, and they have said there are a whole lot of people claiming their allegiance to us, and we don't even know who they are. I guess that has to be clarified. And I just think they're looking at it like we've always done that in the past, which is, okay, let's take care of this one little thing. But this problem is so huge and so massive in the United States that you have to hit it systemically, which can only be done through the system that's set up, which is through the political system. So you got to play the game. And I think what people of color in the Black Lives Matter movement are seeing or thinking is, these are the politicians that are going to address our interests. We know this guy in charge now is going to be, not only will he not address our interests, he will address interests that are actively against us, which is a huge difference. And so I think they're saying we've got to throw all our energy into defeating that and creating this systemic change that I haven't seen in my lifetime, but I'm hopeful that it's about to happen.
Do you not believe that systemic change can actually come from the people? Instead of, I think you know where I'm going to be going with this, but I'll try to explain the best I can. I'm really sick and tired of people constantly going to governments with their problems. Okay, whether the governments have caused them or not, right? They are a very few amount of people, all right? And there are billions of us, right? But there's still this kind of mindset that only world problems can be solved by, you know, those in charge, the government. So we have to go to the government. We have to fund people in the government who we believe are going to give us what we want. Is there not an element of the community getting together and making that change from the ground up, from the bottom of the pyramid upwards? Because we talk about systematic racism. It's that system that caused it, right? It's that system that caused it. It's been this political machine that caused it. Society was structured from the last 100 years from the people in charge. It came from the top up. And now still to this day in 2020, we're still asking those people to fix it. You see how this is like, well, maybe we should just change the way in which we approach problems and the way in which we change. But still right now, we're still begging essentially for this politician to sort out the next problem and it never gets solved? Do you honestly think that if Biden gets in and all this money goes towards his campaign and he gets in 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years down the line, me and you'll be able to come on a podcast and say, oh, black people aren't getting killed by police anymore. Sweet. Biden really sorted it. Or do you think actually we're probably more than likely going to have more of the same shit?
I think this change will, in 4 or 5 years, it was like, so in the 60s in the United States, big push for civil rights. And it's interesting, the same reason why there was this big push in the late 60s for civil rights is why it is happening now. In the late 60s, what tipped the scales for all these people to jump onto this movement was color television. For the first time, people were sitting down in their living rooms and watching the news where the police were sicking German shepherds on black people or shooting them with fire hoses. And at that point, a large group of white people finally said, we can't live life like this in the United States. We've got to help our fellow citizens. And that's what pushed the civil rights through. We're going through that right now with the phones and everything being recorded. And we finally got to a point, like for years we've been asking, when is the tipping point? When is the tipping point when people are going to call for action? And it was watching this man kneel on this guy's throat for 8 minutes and 45 seconds. That became our breaking point. And so then everybody has jumped on, or a lot of people have jumped on and started to protest. I agree. That's where the change starts. Biden is going to be the one that will at least listen. Will he make all the right things? No. Right now, we've got a guy in that doesn't even say there's a problem and gets more fuel if he goes against us and talks against us. To the point where he says a lot of things, purposely or not, that really align with white supremacy in a way that no leader in this country has ever done publicly.
I mean, he's a very interesting guy. Let's put it that way. I just don't feel like his communication skills are very good, and obviously he's a fantastic businessman, or maybe not. Maybe he's just got lucky. But the way in which he communicates to a now extremely diverse country, I mean, the amount of I seen a chart the other day, whether it's real or not, of how many different ethnic groups in America in mass, where there's actually a decent chunk of the population. I mean, it's huge. It's a very, very diverse country, and he doesn't really address his fellow citizens like they are all potentially different with different backgrounds and experiences. And I feel that's where a lot of the tensions come from towards Donald Trump, for sure. However, I will be honest in saying I've never heard him, call for violence against black people. Of course, I'm sure you'd agree. And however, he's
some things. If you moved in that group of white supremacists, he uses some words, he uses some phrases that only they use. He is signaling to them in a way that is very, very damaging and scary to me. So he doesn't say, go out and brutalize black people.
Yeah.
But he will say, the police aren't doing their job, so maybe someone else should take that. And that's happened. Like, people have traveled to these protests and there's a group that is just waiting for him to say, let's start this racial war. And to me, that's scary because they're ready. And you've seen it in some of these protests where they'll travel and feel very justified to go in there and, quote, protect buildings or help the police.
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely seen more white people fighting over this than black people, 100%. In terms of like the majority of like serious incidents like death and stuff like that. The issue for me is that is the blame towards Trump, and there's something I'd love to get into and have an open and honest conversation, because I do feel it's very useful being outside of it in the UK, because we watch the politics in America like it's a film, like it's a TV show.
Yeah,
Okay,
exactly.
it really
Like a reality show.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So we look in from the outside. We're not consumed by it. We don't have any strongly held opinions either side.
Yeah.
So we don't get that, overwhelming confirmation bias that happens.
Mhm.
And we can judge it as if it's like a talent show, right? And what I find very, very intriguing is how Trump gets blamed for, violence on Black people. I mean, you've done so in this podcast. You even said that this police officer now on the back of this Black guy's head because of Trump, right?
Not because of Trump. Any other president throughout our history would have come out and denounced what happened in that situation. That situation was horrible.
Mm.
The police chief has denounced it. The mayor in that town has denounced it. Mm. Trump refuses to even say George Floyd's name. It's very hard being a person of color in the United States and not always feeling like a guest. That, like you said, we have to ask permission to be treated equally. Like that's really starting to weigh on me as I get older, is that I am not a guest in this country. I am part of this country, so that when we're saying as a part of this country, we're hurting, and the response is just get over it. You're whining, you're complaining. It's not really that bad. Yeah, look at the videos. It's bad.
Yeah, no, it exists. Racism is a massive, massive problem, of course. And I mean, I've even seen it. Like, mate, I'm white.
And I'm not saying Trump's the cause of it.
Fine, good.
But I'm also not. But I'm saying he doesn't do a lot to just calm things down. Like
yeah, he doesn't de-escalate.
He could get. This is how he could have gotten the election very easily. Any leader in time of crisis, you do simple things. Bush did it in 9/11. You go out, you talk to people, make them feel comfortable. Yeah, everything's bad, gonna get better. That's all Trump had to do with COVID. That's all he had to do. That's the easiest time to be a leader, is during crisis, because the playbook is pretty simple then. And he couldn't do it. He could not, which shows you he's not a leader. The only reason he's a leader today is because, was he successful? Well, he had a lot of money, and so people did what he wanted. And if they didn't do what he wanted, he didn't do business with them or horribly shorted them. So, yeah, if I had $1 million, I could be successful in an area if someone invested that in me. And he never came up against a lot of people that told him no. And so now he's trying to run the country like he's ran his business. And it's a horrible failure. He's not the guy to do it.
I could sit here honestly, and I could, I share pretty much all of the same views as you do. To in terms of how bad racism is, especially in America, and the internet does a really good way of exposing just how many people have these serious racist views and allow those views to drive their lives. However, I guess where we disagree is the methods in which people are trying to fix this. Okay. And I think we disagree quite strongly, because where I see an awful lot of blame and an awful lot of, what's the word? People looking for reasons why something's broke. We can look for reasons why something's broke forever. Doesn't fix it. We need change. We need a different way of living. We need a different way of communicating, and we need a different way of putting money in places. And this movement, this Black Lives Matter movement, is calling for more of the same shit we've been doing for years and years and years and years and years, putting the responsibility of systematic racism in the hands of politicians, the politicians that have still done absolutely nothing to solve it. Were Black people not killed by police under the Obama's administration, which Joe Biden was very much a part of? Of course. But now, we've had this fucking crackpot in charge for 4 years. So now it's very easy for people to go, oh, well, we need this other guy back, and all our problems are going to be solved. It just doesn't feel to me like a sensible approach to solving serious deep rooted racism that happens on the streets, that happens in schools, it happens in communities, it happens in areas where people come together. All I see with politics is people being separated. And that machine, that political machine, is where the money is going, being raised by Black Lives Matter. If Black Lives mattered that much to these people, fucking give the money to them and use that. You just said to me, if you were given £1 million, you could be successful, yeah, in anything. What if you got 1 billion?
Exactly. You're right.
But it hasn't. It's gone to these politicians instead.
So I don't disagree with you. I think we're kind of caught with the system that we have, so we've got to make that work. But I think both have to come into play. So it is put a more diverse group of politicians in charge, and you're seeing that. So a lot of the Democratic people that were voting into office all over the country look differently than they ever have. There's more people of color, there's more women. So that's a good change. And I think we need to continue doing that. And then it means if Biden gets in, you hold him accountable. So what we do in the United States, and we've done this for decades, is all attention gets on one subject for a couple months, and then someone gets in office and it dies down. I totally agree with you. We cannot let that happen. And what you do is you hold Biden to account and you say, yeah, okay, you've made these promises, now you got to come through on them. And I think with a more diverse administration, which I think he'll bring in, you get those ideas and thoughts on the table where right now you got a bunch of white guys deciding a whole lot of stuff. And I think so we've got to work with the system that we have, which isn't perfect, but it also means holding them to the fire and making them accountable so that they create the change that we need. And I do think there are things in the United States where you guys might not be able to see, but I've seen because I've never seen them before. I've never seen a police chief come out and denounce one of his very own. Those unions are so tight and those bonds are so tight, they never turn on each other. So I've seen that within the last couple months. I've seen mayors come out and denounce police departments. That is encouraging to me. What the NBA and the WNBA did not too long ago was very encouraging to me because I think they could use their power better. And they did. To say we're not going to play for a day cost a lot of people money. And so I think we do things differently to create different change. So it's all of the above. It's just not, we cannot only go through Black Lives Matter. There are all these other channels that we can use all at the same time. And I think that's what brings about the systemic change that we need.
I admire the hope, and it's important to have. I just distrust the system so fucking much.
So
And the issue is that people are looking to the system for the answers. And you do see why I have this opinion, right? You can easily see why.
But understand this too, is that we also see this groundswell. Like you can feel it. There is something happening. Like again, that's never happened in my 53 years. So, and you've got to hold on to that hope, because if you don't, it just gets so horribly depressing.
Yeah,
because
like
I said, it's really hit me lately, this idea that I'm treated like a guest really in my own house. And we need to do a better job of making people like me feel more welcome in our own country.
It's interesting. I feel the UK is very different in terms of we're definitely not more. We're definitely not as what's the word? The allowed words change every single year. I'm not even sure what term I'm allowed to use anymore, right? You know, we're not as diverse as many places in America. It's normally just condensed into London. But I think because London is so overwhelmingly diverse, it's actually really easy for them to be super liberal, because it's more of a super even split. In America, you seem to have a bunch of Black communities just shoved out of the way and just left to their own devices, severely underfunded, extremely underfunded, and who don't get, you know, the same opportunities as a lot of other states and a lot of communities do. And a lot of that is just being made to feel different. that stereotyping is, you know, when you said, you know, you feel like a guest in your own home. Now, you don't actually have to be treated like a guest to feel like a guest in your own home. You just have to, at some point in your life, have the president put on you that you're different and you're a minority, and that you don't have to be a victim of racial abuse to feel oppressed, right?
Right.
Now, that gets fixed by teaching people of minority or of color or of ethnicity or whatever terms you're allowed to use now at a very young age, and making them understand their value, their abilities, that you are just as fucking smart and amazing and as gifted as every motherfucker on this planet. That's where people start to no longer feel like a different human being. And then, of course, they get on the internet and that all gets fucking destroyed anyway. It's what, you know, but that's where it begins, right? That's where it begins. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
How can that start to change? You know, through, you know, I know there's been lots of, you know, Black empowerment and affirmative action and lots of really kind of token gestures, token movements that never really kicked off, because they're all very isolated incidents. You know, oh yeah, we'll let a couple of Black people into university, or we'll give a few of these people a scholarship, and then, you know, we put it on the news, and then, oh, I get a political pat on the back. They're really crappy token gestures of fixing a huge systemic racial problem. What can happen on a huge scale outside of politics, outside of funding, that can happen right at the grassroots of children? Like, it's a generational change that's needed for Black people or whatever race to actually understand their value as a human being, to understand that you are a fucking badass. How can that happen? How can that change be made?
So I work in schools, universities, organizations doing diversity work. And so what I'm trying to get the schools to see, which is actually creating change, is our country. If you're familiar with the comedian Trevor Noah, Trevor Noah. So in his book, he does a great job of explaining what apartheid was, so his country sent a group of people out to create the perfect racism. And so they go all over the world to study where racism is actually functioning beautifully. And of course, they came to the United States, and then they tweaked what we had done in our system and used it for their system. That shows you how bad things are in the United States, where we're being seen as kind of this case study. But the system was set up actually kind of brilliantly, where, okay, we're going to take this group of people from their country, strip them of everything that connects them to that country, and then we'll be good. And they kind of have to depend on us for everything. And then when we raise them up in school, we only show them that the only time they ever were involved in our history was being downtrodden or beaten as slaves. We don't show them the power that our community has given to this community of the United States. We are absent in history. And the very forward-thinking schools even segregate it. And they'll say, okay, we're going to have this one class on African-American history. When isn't that really just United States history?
Of course.
Like, again, that's that whole guess thing where, yeah, we'll talk about you, but only in a sense, but not as you're actually a part of us.
Of course.
And I think schools are finally starting to see that we have to, you want kids to think better about themselves. And if you then show them who they are. If you always show them that you're the one getting beaten, or the one that's not as bright, or the one that's not as talented, is it a surprise that I grew up with a kid in grade school who was always told, you're stupid, you won't amount to anything, Guess where he ended up? In jail, because he became what they told him he was.
I'm so glad you're touching up on this, because a lot of people are really fucking frightened to speak out like this, because the way in which I'd have worded it would have been horrible, no doubt, and you can help me piece it together properly. If you tell someone they're a piece of shit enough times, they're going to
Exactly.
believe they're a piece of shit.
Yeah.
So if you take a kid and say, you're really rubbish at talking, your English is shit, your English is crap, and then they speak to you again, your English is crap, they're going to stop talking. They're going to feel like they can't talk, and then when they do, they're going to talk really bad because they're being worried about talking bad. So they've just become, it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy, every word's a prayer and all that, and so by these kids learning about slavery and only slavery, because this is my issue here, they only learn that all they hear is white people were fucking horrible to you. Book closed. Move on. And sometimes I'm a true believer that awareness does heal and awareness does fix a lot of stuff. But in the terms of the racial landscape, I remember when I was a kid, all I would learn is how fucking bad black people had it from whites. And that was it. I never heard about how you guys fought in our wars with us. I never heard about all the economical, incredible stuff that black people achieved. I just heard about how piss poor they were treated by white people. And then when you're a child, and more importantly, a child of color, who is being told over and over again in all these different classes by all these different adults, people of figures, that your history is just relegated to being abused, you become a victim straight away. You never even needed to be cracked by a whip or have worked for no money to feel like a guest in someone else's country, because you've just been told you motherfuckers have been guests in this country since forever, now feel like one. And then it happens. And of course you've got good people like you actually calling it out for what the fuck it is. Stop only telling these black children that we were treated like shit because they thought we were bad, and actually tell them a little bit about that, and then tell them how fucking awesome they are. And it's definitely not happening enough. How many people, Kevin, of you are there doing this in abundance?
Not enough.
There you go.
Yeah.
And are you telling me right now, Kevin, that if you were given handsome sum of $1 billion, come on, man, crack. I know you say you don't crack and all that stuff. That's mad. Are you telling me right now you wouldn't do a better job leading an organization, educating black children from a young age to understand they're fucking extraordinary, just like the white man next to them? You could do some serious, amazing stuff with that funding, with the work that you do, right?
You definitely.
No doubt your lack of funding has stopped you from making this an even bigger thing, right? If you had the money and if you had someone come to you and say, look, here's a bunch of money, show me what you can do with it, and you had to pitch to me right now on this podcast, you would have some incredible ideas that people would genuinely believe in. But the money's not going to people like you, is it? It's going to, someone else.
Yeah.
A white man, which is even fucking worse. And this is where I've tried having this conversation with people, and I remember I was discussing something with it was a podcast that never actually aired because they asked it not to, and I respected that, and I said, look, I think the Black Lives Matter organization, it's a good message, but I don't think they're doing a very good job of actually fixing a problem. Dude, your model is already way better. I'm sorry, man. The work you're doing is already 1,000 times more sensible and pragmatic, right? And if that's the case, you've already presented me with a better solution than the one and all Black Lives Matter thing that is now the spokespeople for fixing the problem that you're trying to fix. And just by coming out and saying, you know what, I don't know, man, a Black Lives Matter organization, I get bad vibes. I feel like it's just now a money-making machine for political, gain, which that's the fact that it has been used. As you say, that there are people now involved in it who seem to have hijacked it and kind of involved, and I've been called a racist, right? I'm just like, you're racist. I mean, what do you fucking mean? I don't like an organization. Nah, you're racist, man. You don't. How can people have conversations about this type of thing, like me and you did today. Like, you never once, like, you've made me feel very comfortable talking about this topic as a white man.
Mhm.
And there aren't many white people that want to speak about Black lives and Black Lives Matter and like, pragmatically, you know, people need to, we need to risk upsetting each other to find truth in things, right? And I'm a strong believer, open and honest conversations can happen with people you disagree with and people you fucking hate, right? And
Yeah.
then you can still end it
Yeah.
like, yeah, sweet, man, that was wild, right?
Yeah.
Boxers can smack people in the face and shake each other's hand at the end of it, right? And they found out something at the end, who was the better fighter, right? And if people who dislike organizations like Black Lives Matter and people that just live their lives through organizations like Black Lives Matter actually were able to have open and honest conversations without people going, you're a racist, I'm going to cancel you and text your boss, you're going to lose your job.
Mhm.
Because the second that happens, all discourse is out the window and everybody loses. Everybody loses. What do you think that can happen right now in the social world that can actually invite difficult conversations about this topic? Because that's how change is made, by people not hiding away from facts, by people being able to challenge things like Black Lives Matter. Because when you do, you find people like Kevin, because that's exactly what I've done. And when you find people like Kevin, you find the people that can actually make change. How do we start having conversations about this stuff without being scared of being called a racist or having, you know, being cancelled or losing our jobs and being deplatformed?
Well, I think it's a couple of things. So cancel culture is interesting, but I also think there are certain behavior that just shouldn't go on.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
if it happens, you should suffer the consequence for it. So we're seeing that a lot. And so, yeah, don't do stupid stuff, and stupid stuff won't happen to you. But so I think how we create change is, and I talk about this when I go into schools and organizations, is this is not a conversation to have with everybody. I have cousins. I can't have a civil conversation like you and I are having. I have white cousins in my adoptive family. I don't know what it is, our personalities, whatever. We can't have this conversation. And a lot of it is, again, you know, you can say what you want about this administration, but what they've done, which is really scary, is you've kind of blurred the line between what's fact and what isn't. And if I can talk to you and say, okay, this is fact, this is what I see, so let's talk about that. But if you totally refuse to accept anything that I say because you think I'm making it up, it's really hard to have a conversation. So I'm thankful for conversations like this, because I agree with you. I think that's where the change becomes. And then there's this great social activist out there. Her name is Kimberly Jones, and there's this great video on her, and they ask her about, you know, all the rioting that's happening and why are you burning down your own city? And she says, you're concentrating too much on the what and not the why. Why don't you ask yourself, why have we gotten to a point where we are so damn frustrated that the only thing we can do is set something on fire? And what caused that? And if you can stop what's causing that and the pain that that's causing, you'll stop the reaction. And so those are the conversations we need to have. Is, you know, we've got one side that wants to say and paint the picture that every protest in the United States ends violently. That is not true. That's not even close to true. That is a very small section of all that is going on in the country as far as protests. There are peaceful protests. But when you have someone encouraging his followers to go restore order in a peaceful protest, and in their head they're going to restore order, how do you keep that peaceful? And there's so much going on in the background. I mean, there's reports that people are purposely going to protest to cause trouble because they know that'll look bad, to make Black Lives Matter and those organizations look bad. And so, yeah, man, it's yeah. So I think we need to have more conversations like this. Definitely, we need to sit down, but they're not easy conversations to have, and you can't have them with everybody.
Yeah, I know.
What I tell people that I work with is, you know, if it's something you work with or you go to someone you go to school with, These aren't conversations to have unless you've
Mm.
established a relationship with that person.
Mm.
Then you can sit down and calmly talk about it because you
Mm.
like each other. I can't have this conversation with my cousin because in the end, we don't even like each other.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah. I also believe a large part of the problem is, and one of my friends, Stuart, actually pointed out to me the other day, is a lot of people just align their personal identity with these world problems. So then when it comes to having their mind changed or learning some new revelationary information, that's an attack on them.
Yeah.
Because they've just put themselves, their own personal brand, into caring about these things so much so that they can't change themselves because it is them. And I think people need to be taught the dangers of associating yourself exclusively
Right.
with some of these activist agendas, what movements, I guess. I don't know, there's so many different fucking names for them nowadays. And I believe that's causing such a huge issue with confirmation bias, where people are losing family and friends now and they're just not speaking to each other for years and years and years. You know, I know people that got like a Brexit tattoo, for God's sake. You know, when you've heard of Brexit. You know, we our noses ain't clean over here, mate. We've been dabbling in identity politics for a very long time. But it's the same. It's the same formula every single time with these movements, and where identity politics has this crazy habit of causing so much divide to where you can just control everybody. You can almost predict the behavior of a mass population of people when they're so divided. Mm-hmm. So if you can predict the behavior of everybody, you can control it. And that's what I feel is happening with all of this divide, especially going on in America. And it seems to just pop up every 4 years, man, before there's a vote.
Yeah.
And I work in digital marketing. I have a digital marketing agency, and the Black Lives Matter stuff seems to pop up 2 or 3 months before election. Yeah. Okay. Just before the last election and now, the exact same month, literally, it was the exact same month the shit hit the fan. But between all that time, and you see the huge difference in people searching for Black Lives Matter and racial shenanigans, right? And it's the exact point before a thing. And this will die out. The vote will happen no matter which way. I mean, it's going to be chaos no matter who wins. And this will die out for another few years. 100%, that's the trend. But the racism will continue, just like it had for the last 4 years. It will never, ever stop until the generational change happens. We can't change our grandparents, bro. We can try changing my grandparents' minds on the football teams they support or the food they eat. It's not happening. Their experience has been drummed into them. It's created these huge egos. They ain't changing. Because they've aligned themselves, their own identities with the things they're passionate about, right? The confirmation bias stuff that we spoke about. This needs to happen with the kids, right? Which is exactly what you're doing. However, because you can only do it on such a small scale, is that really going to lead to global change, or at least a big enough change to start, that 1% rule where it filters out into the rest? Or can that only happen when people like you are doing this in abundance, and that can only happen through funding and the money going to the right people? Where can you get that funding from? Because if you can't get it from an organization that literally has the words Black Lives Matter in the title, where the fuck are you going to get it from?
Well, I think there are organizations out there that would, especially now. I agree. The past has been election comes, we go back to normal. Mm. I think we have been changed in a way that we can't go back to normal. And I have to grab onto that.
Yeah, I hope so, man.
I've seen signs that I've never, ever, ever seen before. And so I think that if Biden thinks if he gets into office, it's going to be easy, he should think again, because I think now he will be held even more accountable to the Black community than Barack Obama was. Mm.
Well, yeah, he kind of got a pass just because he was Black, right? That was a huge element of that. And
I think part of it too was we just want him to get through this presidency unscathed so that you can't say, well, we can't have another black guy in there because look what he did.
Yeah, it's very true. I can understand, you know, you're looking after your own and all that stuff, and it makes sense. It does make complete sense to me. I do hope, I really hope that, you know, if Biden gets in, that there is change and everybody applies more pressure. I'd want to see more fucking drama. If Joe Biden gets in, I want to see hear more voices. I want to see this happening more, because that's when it matters, right? I mean, I've been promising my wife that I'm going to tidy the kitchen up for a very long time. I'm probably not going to bother to say that shit, you know, get her off my back. And that happens an awful lot in politics, constantly, all the time, without fail. And that's why I believe we should stop going to these people to fix our societal problems, because they're the motherfuckers causing it in the first place. And they find a way to make it profitable for them, which is even crazier. If Biden gets elected and, you know, his administration just goes through the motions and they spend the next 4 years just doing their anecdotal stuff, they got their kickbacks, the next 4 years goes and there's not much change. Police are still shooting black people in and whatever. What happens then? What's next? So you guys are going to wake up and go, you know what? Fuck this. Let's deal with this ourselves now.
I think there is a groundswell of people who will say, that's not good enough. I really do think. And then you've got the younger kids coming up. Man, they're using the internet in a way, like it's hilarious to me. I talk to my kids about this all the time. Their strategies through TikTok or whatever they do to kind of just cause this administration some grief. I mean, it's brilliant. And I think they're starting to understand the power that they have, that they can enact change. And I think, like you said, that's where the change is going to come. We've just got to give them some hope that, yeah, there is a possibility. And so I think you got to hit it not from one area. Like the really sad thing is we've concentrated so much on Black Lives Matter when shouldn't there be like 10 groups that do similar things? Like, why is there only one group that we could look at? And that's really sad. Like, there should be so many other groups. So it means, okay, if Black Lives Matter isn't pushing your buttons, then why don't you start an organization and it handles what you want to handle?
Yeah.
And so we're seeing more and more of that. I think everyone's just kind of throwing so much at them. And I don't know if they even own a lot of that. They don't even own.
I feel like the things that get traction are the things that are reported on. You know, the media and celebrities have so much power in making and breaking movements. And so I don't think this stuff really happens by accident either. You know, there are a lot of incredible causes, a lot of incredible charities that don't get picked up, that don't get spoken about. And then all of a sudden, you know, some Cash Me Outside girl from Dr. Phil is the biggest thing ever.
Exactly.
You know, the way in which our influencers spread information is broken. It's so fundamentally broken to the point where Kanye West's dick can make some of the richest women in the world. You know, they can make somebody super famous just by having sex with them, right? Yeah. So I kind of feel like we need to stop putting the responsibility on the media and celebrities and influencers to get messages out there and get important information out there that leads to change, because they've spent years and years and years and years doing it so badly and doing it so poorly, but yet we still beg and we still ask them to, you know, endorse things and retweet things and post things and vote for things, where that's been a broken system from when I can remember. And I do really do believe the people on the ground like you are going to be the guys that actually lead to change. I mean, how often did you see Martin Luther King begging to Caucasian politicians, please, please, please change this for me? Or did he get the fuck out there and do it himself? And he created this amazing movement which gave people real hope. I mean, we can put our hope into these politicians that have broken this for you guys since forever, or you can create your own hope and have hope in yourselves and trust yourselves that you can create and grow and finally rise up and feel, because whether or not you are oppressed or not, if you guys can just make yourself feel like you're no longer guests in your own home and guests in your own country, and that you all know your value, then you've already won. It's in your heads, right? I mean, you agree with that. That's how you're fixing this problem, by fixing the minds of young Black people. And that's done by the information that they receive.
And it's not just only young Black people. Like, I think we've done a disservice to white people where we have convinced them that they are the end all be all. You know, like, not too long ago, I was on vacation. I was getting on this elevator, and the elevator opened, and there was this 7 or 8 year old little white kid standing right in the middle of the door and would not move out of my way. And that really rubbed me the wrong way. And it had occurred to me that our society has convinced this little 7 or 8 year old that he doesn't have to move for a Black man. And I thought, man, I spent a lot of time telling Black parents how we got to raise kids safely. We need to do a better job of telling white parents, man, don't raise your children to be conned into thinking that they are the end all be all. That doesn't do anybody any good. So you raise all these entitled kids that think the world is theirs and they own everything. And then we in the United States can't figure out why the 18 or 19-year-old college kid has raped all these girls. Because the last 18 years, you've told him that everything is his. Why wouldn't he think she's his?
Or at least everything was his. And they just continue that.
Yeah, so now,
just continue.
And you're seeing that so much with all these protests is, you see that a lot with Trump too, which is, you can tell when people aren't used to being told no. So you see a lot of these, you know, you call them Karens, that absolutely freak out because someone has asked you to wear a mask.
Yeah. Because
no one in your life has ever told you, how about you just kind of shield this part of your life for the benefit of the good of everybody? And they go, no, I'm the important one because everyone's always told me it's about me. And so I think we need to do a better job of educating children, Black children and white children, that Black people have made contributions to this country. And that doesn't help only Black kids. That helps the white kids too.
Well, I kind of feel like everybody coming together as a community and just having a little bit more love and compassion and sharing this much higher vibrational state of existence benefits everybody. Like I believe an awful lot of race, and this is a fucking mad thing to say, by the way. Please don't disconnect after I say this. But a lot of racists are victims too of growing up in a society that made them racist. You know, they had racist parents, they read racist shit, the books they were given was racist propaganda, and now they've become these humans with these strongly held opinions that are fucking dumb. And you know that they've now been made to. If I grew up in Iran, I'd be a Muslim. If I grew up in central Thailand, I'd be a Buddhist. It doesn't mean either one of them are right. That would have just been my experience. And I was a kid. I would have done anything anybody told me. And I remember when I was a child, I grew up in a very white neighborhood, and the first primary school I went to was a lovely primary school, and there was a couple of Black kids, but not many, maybe two, the whole school. And never used to see color. I was just like, yeah, sweet, man. Yeah, cool. Just play together, do everything. Up until the point, then we'd started getting taught about who Black people were. And these Black people were people who had to sit at the back of the bus. And then they were these people that we were horrible to or owned. And we got them to do things for us. And that all of a sudden, all of our heads were like, sweet, well, kids are horrible. We know that. Now we have all of this stuff to use in a disagreement with a Black person. Exactly. And then that's when the oppression begins through the information you're telling children about the past, present, and potential future of an entire race of people. And
that could all change if you just, like you said, what if we raised kids to understand that, you know, Black people came from kings and queens in Africa?
Yeah. Yeah.
instead of you were captured and taken away.
Yeah, you guys were
Like
like the
you're descendants
original
of royalty.
badasses, man. Like the
Yeah,
actual history, actual black
yeah,
history is
yeah,
awesome.
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
How much of your upbringing, of being put up for adoption and learning about your story, how much of that led to feelings of illegitimacy for you, knowing that that was the beginning of your existence, and how did you deal with that?
Yeah, so this was interesting. So I'm this biracial kid adopted by a white family. And so right away, and a lot of us adoptees carry this, which is,
Mm,
I must not be good enough because for whatever reason, my mother gave me away. Like, I have friends who had horrible parents, but they weren't bad enough where they gave the kids away. So it's
mm,
hard for you to grow up thinking, well, I'm just as good as everybody else because
mm,
my own mother didn't even want to keep me.
mm,
Um, and then you've got this society in the States which says you're less than because you're a person of color. So I've got kind
mm,
of these voices in my head
mm,
as an adoptee telling me you're not good enough because your mom gave you away, and then society telling me you're not good enough because you're a child of color. Man, does that compound a message that I got growing up.
mm,
Um, and so when bad things happened to me, or I was the victim of things, I walked away thinking I deserved it because I wasn't as good as that kid.
mm.
And
Uh,
that would have been totally different if I had been taught that I came from royalty and that, man, I come from this lineage of great people, not
mm-hmm.
just slaves.
Yep.
And instead I walked away kind of thinking, yeah, man, I'm just not a good person. And everyone keeps telling me that. And
Mm,
all the signs keep telling me that. So how
mm.
can I kind of combat that? And so
So
that's part of what I do is try and go out and
yeah,
like
so you've
dead
used
man.
your own experience. You've managed to have that level of awareness of going, I was made to feel unworthy. So you became unworthy. You accepted it just through the information you were told about your past, right?
Yes,
And that same thing can happen when somebody's told that about their lineage or their
exactly.
ancestry or their, dude, if I don't know, if I found out, the majority of my great grandfathers and grandfathers were pedophiles and rapists, dude, I'd feel shit about myself.
Exactly.
I'd be like,
Right.
that would affect the hell out of me, right? So then when you got these kids being told, oh yeah, man, all your ancestors, bad, they were owned. They weren't allowed to go to the same places. They had to sit on the back of the bus. That then gives these children this self-reflection on who they are. A child's sole responsibility from the age of 0 to bloody 10 is figure out who the hell they are and who they're going to be. And
Mhm.
that gets shaped so easily. Kids are malleable, man. They're these little love packages, right? And they're just brand new, and you can do whatever you want with them in their heads. And then what our schools are telling them is what creates their ego, their self-reflection on themselves. And I feel like it's a great place to start in fixing this problem. And you're clearly
Yes.
doing the right stuff. But where do you go from here? Where do you, Kevin, go from just being the guy that cares and the guy that feels like he has the answer, because you feel like you have the answer, right? You wouldn't be doing this otherwise, right?
Right.
And I uh, I felt like I've had the answer in all my debates and conversations. We love to believe we're right, but your version of what you're doing is very similar to what I feel needs to be the change. It's just you don't have the funding, and I want people like you, when there's, like I explained earlier, in these individual communities and these black communities, to have the funding and the plans and stuff. Where do you go from here to make this change? Because you said you want hope and you're holding on to the hope for these politicians to sort it. I'm definitely not. I want to have hope in people like you. I want to be excited and be waiting and Googling people like your names, not BLM. I want to be Googling Kevin Hofmann or whatever he's doing and what his friends are doing and what the friends of their friends are doing. What do you do next to really make a difference, to really make a change that excites people?
One, I think, is just continue to do. I do, and here's the interesting thing. So I think I am the product of this unique environment that I grew up in. This biracial kid in a black city with a white family.
Mm,
I have some very unique background
mm,
that is perfect for speaking to this kind of thing. So I think that I continue doing what I'm doing, and eventually it will hit. I
mm,
don't know where, when, or how, but I'm just hopeful that it will gain traction, and that, yes, that I will be given the opportunity to make great change. In the meantime, I concentrate on the schools and organizations I'm working with
mm.
to see change there, because that gives me hope. And it's just one at a time. And if that means, doing a podcast and there's one or two people that go, man, what he said made sense, let me look into this,
Mm,
then it's worth it. And
mm.
I think you just keep plodding along. And eventually I think, it only takes one time for something to go viral and really just take effect. And, that's what I'm hopeful for. And if it doesn't, then fine, but I'll affect the community that I'm part of. Yeah.
Exactly. You can only do what, you got to do you, right? And I think getting involved in trying to raise an awful lot of money comes an awful lot of drama every single time. And, who knows? I hope you get the support you need. It's the first time I've heard of anybody. I've been saying this shit needs to happen for a very long time, and it just so happens my first podcast guest to talk about the subject is one of the guys doing it. So I'm really grateful that you're doing something like that, outside of the scope of begging the political system to make the change for you. It's really refreshing to see somebody taking some proactive initiative in actually going out there into these schools and educating Black children on how awesome they are and how awesome they can be, and that they're no different. And I just
And, and,
believe.
and this just occurred to me. This is actually good that we had this talk, because I think in a way you're right. It is backwards. So my hope is that I do what I'm supposed to do, because I truly feel called to do this,
Mm,
that it will make such an impact that then the politicians come to you and say, man, you seem to know what you're talking about. How can we help you?
mm,
Instead of how can I help them? And
mm,
I think, and that's part of that grassroots where,
mm,
yeah, it's just this one guy, creating change. And then people go, okay, that's the change I want to be a part of,
mm.
because this politician over here isn't talking to what I want to do. And I think that's it. And then, so then, instead of the tail, we're the head.
Mm.
And
Before
that
we end
change
this,
comes that way.
I want to talk about police brutality. Okay, one of the world's most favorite topics at the moment. We don't get too much of it here in the UK because we don't go running around with guns like crazy people.
Yeah, exactly. You don't need to.
We just got the knives. But in America, obviously, is clearly a real big issue, and it's been at the heart of a lot of racial incidences. We can't hide from the fact that police also kill a bunch of white dudes too, uh, regularly, but it happens in a very different way. It normally happens in a very in a far less brutal way. I have a friend who runs a very famous website, Scandinavian website, and the website is mainly memes, but also like gore and risky content, a little bit like Live Leak, basically. And so, of course, like police brutality has its own category on there, right? There's so much of it. How sad's that? And you see a lot of white people being killed by police officers in very different ways. They get shot once normally, just the
Right.
once, which is still bad. Deaths, but they just done. And there clearly is a very big lean towards killing Black people when it comes to police brutality. And of course, the theme of my problem solving, which you've probably picked up on, is less identifying what's going on and more actual change. How do we stop police from behaving like this? Because we can march and protest and burn down buildings and cry for, certain people who get killed by police officers, or we can start treating every single police incident as one individual problem and address it as a one entity, because otherwise we just get blindsided. We've been speaking so much about George Floyd, we forgot every other victim about police brutality. It's been polarized and then picked up as a political thing, and then you know, people roll with it. How do we fix police brutality in the United States in a world where it's too comfortable and easy to isolate our thoughts on one specific incident?
I think what you do, it has to be a system change. So understand this, and I think people don't realize that we're all victims of this racism in the United States. So it was so when white people centuries ago owned black people, it was easier for some to stomach that by saying, well, they're subhuman. That's why we can treat them so brutally. That makes me feel better because I don't feel like a savage, because it's just like a dog. Like sometimes I have to discipline my dog. I don't feel bad about that.
Yeah.
And so again, it's all about teaching. So if you teach someone that from the time that they could speak as they grow up, and you constantly give them the message that black people are bad and that they're dangerous, and then you put them through a 6-week or however long training course,
which is no time at all, by the way.
It's
like the least amount of time in the world for a police force.
So you've got to change that. It should be longer. And someone brought this up a couple weeks ago, which I never thought about, which is, so when you go through the police academy, they give you the worst case scenario ever, all the time. So they tell you, okay, pulling this guy over, traffic stop, it goes wrong, he has a gun, what are you going to do? You then train these guys to be so on edge. You compound that with all the thoughts that they've been given as they grew up, which is black people are bad, they're dangerous. So now I have thoughts in my head I'm not even realizing. And you've now wired me through training to think at any moment someone's going to kill me. So I'm on edge. And now I'm on edge, especially because it's a person of color. I'm fearing for my life, whether it's rational or not. So the way I respond to that is violently, because I know this guy's violent. He's going to kill me because they told me in training, everyone's out to kill me.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I'm going to put 7 in his back before I even see if he's a threat or not. Because I got to put him down before he puts me down. And when you look at it like in all its totality that way, that you're raised to see a certain set of people in a certain way, and then you're trained in a certain way, it kind of makes sense why things are happening the way they are. So you've got to totally dismantle that whole thing. And you do have to handle it individually. And what you've got to do is, if you're not doing things just like any other job, you're not doing it the way you're supposed to, minimum is you get fired. You definitely don't get put on administrative leave, still get paid.
Yeah.
To basically go back out on the street when it cools down.
Do you think there's also an element now of a reaction from the black community who are being pulled over from the police? Because, you know, if a police officer has been trained to feel threatened way more by a black suspect than a white suspect, now I imagine you have a genuine community of black criminals or suspects who were like, yeah, motherfucker, I'm going to shoot this police officer before he shoots me.
Yeah.
So then it's just being escalated. And this problem is now just being completely blown out of proportion, because now that division has caused 2 people to fear each other. And that fear is manifesting into violence.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And it's, yeah, so it just keeps building on top of each other.
And we changed
so now,
that.
And any time, you know, there's a police car behind me, man, it's just that feeling of, man, this could go horribly wrong.
I remember I was in the States a few years ago with my brother. I was in Florida. So not the most accurate representation for an English person to come to America. What a wild place that is. And we were driving to through Cape Canaveral, right? We hired a Ford Mustang, like a 5-liter convertible. And my brother was driving and he was like, let's see how quick this could go. We were doing this astronaut training thing, right? Kennedy Space Center. And I don't know, we got like 130, then 140, then 150 miles an hour. Like, this is cool. And next thing you know, there's this police car behind us and we're getting pulled over. And we're like, oh shit, we're English. We don't know. Dude, my experience of police officers in America from that point was everything you've been saying and seeing in the media and in movies. So, I was scared.
Right.
And I started recording on my phone because this was my view on police officers in America.
Yeah.
And I was like, right, okay. So he pulled us over, and it was just like this fat white police officer, with a sheriff hat and whatever. I was like, what? It's like some kind of Terminator. And he came up to them when he was like, put your hands where we can see them. And I was like, oh no, I'm gonna get shot.
Yeah.
And I dropped my phone. Luckily, the camera like faces upwards, and I'm just there with my hands in the air. And then we went English 100%, man. We were just like, oh, hello there, officer. Oh, good day. How are you? I'm terribly sorry. And he was really sound. He was like, nah, we just need to see, where your hands are, because if you've got a weapon and stuff. And he was super, super nice to us. It was a really cool experience. Luckily, he didn't actually, he clocked us going like 90, not 150. Otherwise, we'd have gone straight to county jail.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I was really cute at that time. I'd have had a horrible time in jail over there. And he was really respectful. He was really nice. But what that thing done for me was realize how terrifying that experience can be, just by having a pre-existing idea on the potential outcome of such an event of being pulled over by a police officer. So then when that's heightened by being black, and the current political landscape is fuck police, defund police, and then there's been a bunch more shooting, and you're just living in fear constantly, and you have a weapon on you, I'm not surprised that people want that gun close to them when they're being pulled over by a police officer. If all they're being told in the media that, black people are being targeted by police, so you better go careful when they pull you over. And I'm not really sure how that can be a behavior that can change. I'm not sure how that can be fixed. Once that fear is instilled in people, I mean, if Donald Trump had stood up and said exactly what you said about, you know what, guys, yeah, this happened. I think our police are kind of being trained to fear the black man, and we really need to put some work in to stop that from happening during training, because it doesn't seem like it's really doing any favors. It would be a start. It would definitely be a start in making people realize how important other people's experiences are. But I'm not really sure how the police brutality piece can be fixed in terms of no longer making black people fear police. How do we?
I think you create consequence. So that's the big thing we have in our community. Okay, so a white guy a cop shoots a black guy, unjustified, and then they just get off. So part of our system that's really broken is, so then say the police department does try to bring charges against the police officer. Well, it's the prosecutor that needs the police to do cases in the future. So a lot of the prosecutors don't want to create an enemy out of one of their allies. They need the police to give them evidence so that they can prosecute and send other people to jail. And so we've got to do a better job of, okay, this police officer here has done something bad. He's going on trial. Then let's bring in a different prosecutor that doesn't work with this police department. And they're going to do an unbiased investigation of what's going on. They'll prosecute. That's better than, these people have to have worker relationships with each other. And they're not. And so in the past, they won't bring charges against the police department because they need them. To me, that's a simple fix. That just makes sense. Like, why would you allow that? That is such a broken part of our system. That's one change you can make. And I think it's just, police departments just have to call out bad cops. Yeah. Like, that's the thing you hear all the time is, well, it's only a few bad cops. Well, then there's not enough good cops saying that they're bad cops.
Yeah, exactly.
Why don't you all police your own instead of standing by them? If they do something that's horribly wrong, say that. And get rid of them. Get them out of your organization. Instead, they stand behind them and protect them.
Kevin, you're doing some amazing stuff. Keep it up. It's been very insightful for me and very eye-opening to hear the work that you're doing, and actually quite relieving, because throughout discussing these topics with many people, there has been an absence of proactive change, and people actually, and I think that's because you don't see it in the media, you don't see it endorsed by celebrities, because it's not exciting enough. Oh, there's this guy and he's going into schools and he's trying to, retrain black kids that actually, you mean something. That doesn't get clicks, doesn't sell stories or newspapers or shit. It doesn't, does
Right.
it? But you are the type of person that deserves to be at the forefront of, Black Lives Matter, because you are actually putting in the work to show kids that their lives matter and that they have the purpose. So I wish you all the hope and luck in the world. I'm already grateful for you having been successful. I think it's very important to have the vision that you have and the drive and the motivation to make sure that you succeed in everything you do. So keep doing what you're doing. And I hope one day something you do goes viral. You have a conversation with someone and it just goes boom, and because you clearly deserve it. And I would love to get you back on this podcast sometime in November. No particular reason why. I think
To talk about.
I think no matter what, America is going to be a wild place to live in November. And the worrying thing is it emanates out to lots of different countries now.
Mm-hmm.
A cause in America is a cause in England now. It's like we're just close cousins. The internet is pretty much removed the Atlantic Ocean. It may as well no longer exist, because the internet has connected us all so much where, a white person's problems in America becomes a white person's problem in the UK, and the same for black people. And it needs to end. We need to be one. We need to be one community. And that begins by educating the youngest generations that we are no different now. We ain't no different now at all. So keep up the good work, and I'd love to have you on again. It's been awesome.
Appreciate you. Thanks a
I'll
lot.
catch you later, Kevin. Thanks, man.